today. I'm going to take you through the agenda. We have it organized in 3 sections. I'm going to give you an overview of the economic impact of COVID-19, and I want to share with you some particular aspects of it to consider. Mike is going to give you a summary of the government support schemes and some of the insights around implementation. And then I was going to share with you some of the practical ideas and thoughts we have around changes of focus on research that are going to be relevant to help companies return to a successful operating environment post-COVID-19. So the challenging reality of COVID-19 is daunting, as we all know. We've probably been very focused on national statistics, but I just want to cover some of the global statistics and the pattern. In the upper left, you can see the total number of deaths per country, and you can see that it is indeed a global pandemic by definition. On the graphic below that, you can see that on a per capita basis, the countries with the darker red color are the countries that are most affected. And probably most pertinent, you can see Ireland with well over 100 deaths per million is certainly one of the most adversely affected countries. There are other countries who've done better than us, so we're definitely challenged by COVID-19. Some other key points, obviously, there's over a third of the global population locked down at the moment. There's over 2.4 million cases currently registered and rising. We know the only successful tactic so far is social isolation based on testing and tracing protocols. So the general consensus is there won't be a return to normal operating reality for quite a while. And a lot of the experts are saying that really won't happen until a successful vaccine is identified, tested, and it can be manufactured and distributed. The graphs on the right just show the undeniable reality that cases continue to grow. A bit of positive news at a global basis, you can see that the total number of deaths per day is beginning to stabilize, but it's very early stages before we can draw absolute conclusions there. So the next graph I want to share with you is a view of the market capitalization of companies involved in various industrial sectors across a very broad spectrum. There's over 31 sectors analyzed. And the chart is really saying on a year to date, the overall value or market capitalization value of these companies has declined significantly. Some sectors are more affected than others. You can see the airline industry obviously has been profoundly affected, and we're well aware of that. But there is a significant negative impact to the value of companies operating across all the sectors analyzed. And one of the realities is that it's very much driven by a drop in demand associated with the population lockdown globally, as much as supply chain disruption. So demand on 17 of 25 industries, demand shock has been a really profound contribution to the loss of value for the companies in those sectors. Early indicators. So just looking at some of the realities from a local perspective, we know that supermarket branded food retail has grown at a very significant rate, over 15% in the last 2 months. It's putting huge pressure on supply chains and distribution. The Irish automotive industry is significantly adversely affected with a huge drop in new car sales, obviously enough in the last month, with no anticipated recovery at all in 2020. Internationally, there's some positive stories, as you might imagine, with the growth in teleconferencing and digital streaming services. We can see huge adoption in accounts for Disney+. Zoom share price has gone through the roof as the adoption of teleconferencing facilities for many, many organizations has been very, very significant over the past 6 weeks. In terms of tourism, hospitality, as you would imagine, hotel bookings and restaurant bookings have literally fallen off a cliff over the past 6 weeks. And a lot of companies in those sectors are really struggling to survive. So the long-term forecast, so considering how big is this economic impact going to be? So some of the experts have been looking at this, and the chart really shows from a US perspective the overall drop in GDP as a result of the major recessions. There's the Great Depression, World War II are the major peaks, and then moving closer towards present time, you can see the financial crash of 2008, 2009. And you can see the experts are looking at a significant drop in GDP in the US, and you can take an inference that that's going to transfer globally as well. They're obviously speculating about how quickly we can recover and whether the virus can be contained successfully or not. On a positive side, the overall global economic clock speed is much faster than it was 100 years ago. So there's confidence that the recovery can be relatively robust and quick, but the impact is undeniable. And when you get convergence on economic leaders already arguing and presenting a unified case, we know it's going to be very, very significant. McKinsey put together a nice model on phased response for companies. So they've identified 5 phases. They're pretty obvious. Resolve is the first one. We've all gone through that, and that's really dealing with the very short-term challenges around employee health management, deployment of technology. How do you work to keep your business essentially operating given the challenges? Resilience is really bedding in and understanding how that's affecting your operational realities. There's obviously demand shocks I mentioned earlier. Can you keep your business running with a blend of remote working and some physical working, or indeed no physical working and all remote? And the big thing companies are thinking about is when can we return and preparing for return. What will return look like? There's ongoing debate every day about what would be required for a successful return to work. Various groups are lobbying the government at the moment, putting forward their case, but there's no doubt with the unchanged realities around the virus, health protocols will be really, really important, and employees will be looking for companies to demonstrate that. And that's going to be a challenge for a lot of our manufacturing clients in terms of how can you return to some normal operating procedures, but at the same time adhere to all the protocols necessary to prevent any further spread of the virus. Reimagination is a key stage because I think some of the longer term impacts of the virus will be significant and they will change the direction of businesses. We already see some businesses trying to pivot in terms of their output to make sure their output is relevant to the current climate. And there's going to be continued work in that phase because there probably will be changes that are almost irrevocable or unreversible as a result of the experience we've all had working and living through COVID-19. Then reform, there probably will be some reform as well, and the smart companies will try and anticipate what those reforms will be and be well positioned to comply with them. I just want to leave you with some long-term considerations. So I mentioned this already. I think there will be significant shifts. We've probably all seen this in our lives in terms of what we stopped spending money on versus what we started spending money on. And I think some of those shifts will be permanent. It's obviously my opinion, but other commentators are saying that this is the single biggest economic shock we've seen in our lifetime, and it's probably recalibrating some of our personal views on what's essential in our lives. Second point there is, the planet has never looked healthier. One of the positives, obviously, with all the reduced traffic and industrial activity, that's a view of northern Italy, and it shows, over the Po Valley, there's a dramatic reduction in pollution, which is very positive, and there's similar views from other pollution spots around the planet. I think there is going to be a desire to try and retain some of this improved pollution control as a result of the lockdown, and that may mean a drive for more sustainable manufacturing practices going forward. I think on the third point, companies must demonstrate to their employees that health and well-being is important. It always is important, but obviously with COVID, there's an increased expectation and heightened awareness among employees that if companies do return, they return in a very, very compliant fashion. And we've seen how we've been able to blend remote working with physical working at a minimum. I think that's going to stay going forward because a lot of companies are discovering they don't need so many people in the office, and a lot of companies have been able to maintain a level of productivity with a significant degree of people working from home. The last point I'd make is it's been really interesting to see for very critical products that have relied on a broadly distributed global supply chain, that can get disrupted very easily. So there's new thinking about the value of regional supply chains and proximity to markets for very critical products and looking at that. So I think regional supply chains for critical products is a trend that's probably going to evolve going forward for companies.